runs in basically two directions. One is that we are trying to create infrastructure so that we can use AI for the good that we want. And the second is that the same AI can help run our infrastructure in a more resilient and sustainable way. So there are these two sides to this, which is very interesting, which is probably not true for any other kind of a broad use case if you think about it. So that is very interesting. And the second was that the design choices when we think about our infrastructure are shaped by what we want that infrastructure to deliver. So ultimately, when we think about the resilience and sustainability as the topics that we are discussing, they are also shaped by our constraints and the choices that we make. So with that kind of an overview, and now to build on some of these discussions forward, um, we have a very interesting set of speakers. So I'm going to start with you, Sharad, and you happen to be sitting right next to me also. And Sharad runs SIFI Infinite Space Limited. So those of you know SIFI, and those of you who are in my generation, SIFI is an old player in the Indian ecosystem. But when we are thinking about AI infrastructure, which is a new in thing, SIFI represents the data center layer in this conversation and in this infrastructure. So Sharad, let's take a step back and let's have an assessment of this infrastructure. I think it was you who was telling me, or I think it was you only, that our entire data center capacity is less than the size of the data center capacity of Chicago. And I looked up Chicago, and it's true. And maybe it is mature and all of that, but I want you to tell us that when we look at in the global context where we are, what are some of the things that define the ecosystem as it stands, the shape and size of this ecosystem? Where do you think there are differences in terms of how this ecosystem is shaping up in India as to probably what you see outside? And also, what are the areas where there are gaps in this ecosystem? So we'll go about in the future later, but give us a good sense of the present today.
Yeah, let's just start with the history then, right? Uh, in India, the data centers started taking a shape after the cloud transformation of the cloud movement started. So the hyperscalers and the cloud service providers, they started entering into the country in 2015, 16. Before that, many of these startups that in India came uh, on the back of the cloud services, they ended up using the infrastructure outside India. One of the large hyperscaler player earned more than $200 million revenue from India in 2015 without having the data center presence in the country. From there, when it is started, it is still has not reached to any stage where it could be the kind of capacity that the United States have. So for example, the United States at the end of 2024, my numbers could be wrong here and there, but somewhere between 20 to 25 gigawatt of the data center capacity versus India's just 1.3 gigawatt, which is today probably 1.5 gigawatt. So a lot definitely needs to happen to get where we should be. So talking about the future later, but what is happening today?
Yeah.
Right? Uh, Out of that 1.5 gigawatt capacity that we have today in the data center infrastructure, close to 3 to 3.5 gigawatt capacity is under development. Now, under development capacity could come live, let's say, next 2 to 3 years. And you would say that India will be 3 times the data center capacity of today in 2 to 4 years, but it still will not be enough what is required to be taken care of. And there is a lot more need to happen and a lot faster it needs to happen so that the time to market is shorter and shorter possible so that we could bring 10 gigawatt in next 4 years, not uh, just the 3 to 4 gigawatt. And how things are happening for towards that. How is industry reacting to that? How is the infrastructure reacting to that? And how the whole ecosystem is building around that. So starts with you could say the capital. Uh, it feels like that there is no shortage of capital right now. This is the capital intensive business, and this is the business where the returns could be made in the assured way with a very high credit worthy customers. Therefore, the credit is not such a, or the capital is not such a big issue. Second is the government support and the policy and the regulatory framework. It does look like government is very, very supportive to the data center infrastructure. It's such a huge event being organized today in this week for AI, that AI event will have make no sense if we didn't have the data center infrastructure, the layer below what will run the AI. So government is supportive. Recent times we would have seen, Ashish, you and I both have followed that how government had been consistently organizing the consultations with the industry. In fact, government has heard the hyperscalers also, and their demand has been met, it seems, in the latest union budget, and that will probably create a lot more demand. One of the big tax hurdles that they were facing, one of the big policy hurdles they were facing, it is now removed, so that does create a demand acceleration for to bring the hyperscaler support also. Infrastructure is coming up very nicely. Uh, Unlike the US, where the energy time to market for energy currently right now is 3 to 5 years, and the hyperscalers or the data center service providers there cannot wait for utility to bring that energy so long, and therefore they are doing a lot of behind the meter infrastructure, the power development. That scene doesn't exist in India. India has the surplus power capacity, and the transmission infrastructure is in such a way that it can bring power to whatever extent possible to the facility at the moment when it is required. So in a way, the ecosystem is fully in place to really catapult us to the extent where we need to be. It's just that we all together need to execute it. And there is enough number of us who are making sure that we get to that capacity level as quickly as possible.
All right. So, Sharad, we heard from you, and it's very clear and loud in this room that as far as the data center layer is concerned, we are only dealing with the problem of plenty. And really we have to, for it is for us as an industry to capture the market.
Exactly.
And I also agree with you that from a government point of view, from the policy lens, because that's something that we've been working closely with the industry, that they've really tried to address, whatever concerns that could be there in terms of making a lot of those commitments in investment actually happen. And but before I move on, and I'll come to Rushali just in a minute, is that tell me, when you talk about the ecosystem today, how would you rate the Indian data center ecosystem when you think in terms of things like resilience or things like incident response? So just a quick answer. What is your sense?
See, we can measure it in terms of the outcomes.
Hmm.
Uh,
You can give me an example to
Yeah,
explain. Yeah.
we measure it in terms of the outcomes and what is the expected outcome of an infrastructure. It should always be available. It should be resilient in the sense that redundancies should not be lost. There should be least amount of risk into the infrastructure. It should be secured physically and the software layer and network layer and all layers. It should be safe. It's the electrons per square millimeter is very high in the data center. It's not such a safe place if it's not well taken care of. And then it should be working towards the sustainability, that is the renewable energy consumption, and then also towards the RE100 or net zero goals. In all these aspects, India had been a zero availability incidents. We haven't seen any downtime of data centers in the country. We haven't seen any physical security incidents in the data center. Safety during whether the construction, deployment, or operation. We don't have any recorded safety incidents that have impacted the life. Obviously, there will be good saves and near misses at times, but not to the extent that there had been the losses. And then generally it had been resilient. In fact, our customers keep us on the toe when we lose the resiliency. So the example is that if there is a redundancy in the infrastructure and the redundancy goes down, then not just us, but our customers also get nervous about that. And that's where we are. Uh, the country is full of engineering talent uh, who are designing and deploying and then operating these very, you could say, mission critical setups. And they are able to do it very nicely.
All right, great. So I'm going to come back to you later, and I'm going to shift track a little bit, And Rushali, you are the global director for climate operations at Google, and we are so delighted to have you here. And what I want to do is to straight away jump into your role in terms of what you do, and try and understand that, and the topic is the sustainability aspect, which also Sharad alluded to. And by the way, if any of the claims which he made, if you as Google say no, 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 we think these are some of these things which are not really so true, feel free to tell us. But first, on the sustainability. Given the fact that in a lot of these things, when we think about from a business lens, cost, reliability, speed, these drive the entire infra ecosystem. And in some sense, one could probably argue that some of these might be at cross purposes sometimes, or at friction sometimes, when you think of our sustainability goals. For example, we also think in terms of time to deploy and so on and so forth. So how does those decisions sit within an organization, and what is the journey that you have seen? And also maybe technology comes to rescue at times, but and also help us understand in terms of geographies, because you operate at a global level, that do these decisions and these aspects materially change when you look at particular kind of geographies? Because in India, south of equator, there is a heat, there is all of those kind of issues. So help us understand, how does your role really define some of these things when you look at sustainability as a objective in itself?
Thank you. That's a lot of questions. So I'm going to try and remember as many as much as I can. Can everybody hear us? Yes. Thank you. I'm going to start with first saying thank you. This is like it's an interesting event to be at, right? Having an AI summit in India at the time when you're talking about so much of infrastructure expansion, and it's so linked to clean energy and that expansion. So it's a fascinating time, and I'm super privileged to be here. I also appreciate the fact that the between the three main pillars and the seven chakras, you have all of the elements of sustainability, which is planet, or whether it's resiliency or people. And I appreciate that, because I think that's this kind of philosophy we have internally within Google, and I'm sure all the hyperscalers have, as to how do you look at growth. And there was a time where sustainability used to be more like a CSR, more like a wrapper, more like building on things. And what I think has shifted in a good way is, how do you build all of these things into it versus bolting it on later on? And I'll walk you through a few examples. So my role at Google is to help Google decarbonize across all its operations and its value chain. That's sort of like at the top of it. But what that includes is looking at every single aspect that we have in Google, whether it's our your foundations, from your materials that you get in, to your construction, to how do you operate a data center, to then how do you actually sort of generate anything on top of it, whether it's green software or the application. So how do we build sustainability or carbon or any of those metrics as we go along the process? And there are trade-offs. I don't think, if anybody tells you it's a win-win, it's a good idea. But in general in life, I think we always have trade-offs. And what I believe is more authentic is appreciating those trade-offs and then working through it as you go through. And so a good example is, I think what you said is, right now we're at an interesting point where we have the technologies, but the speed at which we need AI deployed, the speed at which we need infrastructure built, and the speed at what it takes to normally deploy some of these technologies don't always go hand in hand. And you mentioned about in the US, right? The time for interconnection, the time to get grid energy is so much longer, and you're trying to figure out new models around it. So there is a trade-off between speed, technology, efficacy, and how do you do that, and where does innovation come into play? In some other ways, there are within trade-offs, I would say there's more like design considerations. So you talked about, different geographies. Now, some are hotter than the others, some are more water risk zones than the others. And so when we look at design for data centers, we look at some of those pieces as to like, we use an air cooled system, it's a water intensive region. We use a water one where we have enough access to water. So those are actually design considerations. And I can tell you, the hyperscalers have been doing this for quite a few years. So from a design perspective, I think we've have enough knowledge. The question is how fast and where you can customize it to that location. And that I think is the next piece that we're trying to get to, right? So the India data centers will be fantastic. We've got smaller pieces, but like the scale at which we're looking at now means we look at these design considerations slightly differently. Um, I'll address one other thing. We've sort of in general, I feel there's a lot of discussion around energy, power, and water are the bigger constraints that come out of the data centers. For the most part, so Google has so far done 22 gigawatts of clean energy across, and that's a huge thing. We started off with like initiating and inventing PPAs before everybody was on board. And why I say that because it's actually a good thing to have this growth and tech companies who are generally have are good at capex and have good capital foundations and who are good at innovation and scaling at the cutting edge of energy transition, because I think that momentum is helping everyone to move forward faster. You're seeing a lot more, amongst all the hyperscalers, you're doing first of a kind projects, you're doing things which then moves the innovation faster because you have someone taking the bet, you have someone who's investing the early pilot phases into it, and then you also have them as big off takers. Remember, in the energy market, you need big off takers, you need commitments to do that. And I think those are the pieces that we lean into. So from a sustainability perspective, just rounding it up, it's in your design, it's in your procurement, it's in your how you're thinking about data center siting, access to clean energy, and not what you take from the grid, but what you can actually add and bring on as you build your operations.
All right. No, that's good to know, Rushali. And I think it is amazing to also hear those numbers in terms of 22 gigawatt of clean energy done. So I'll come back to you because I'm going to talk to you about some maybe about your India plans, and we'll put that in the context of sustainability when we'll come back. But Nicole, I want to now focus on your work at AWS. So Nicole Foster, she is the Director of Global AI and ML Policy at the AWS. So I want to shift focus on resilience, because I think at the end of it, when we think about AI infrastructure, the single most important thing would be trust. So when you think about AWS journey in terms of building out that kind of an infrastructure, which kind of relays that. Uh, so where if you were to kind of reflect and don't go too back in the past, we want to keep it a little more current in terms of maybe last couple of years or so, that where do you think the industry has really moved forward in terms of genuine improvements to be able to deliver that kind of a trust for all that sits on the other side of the infrastructure, which is the client and customers and users. Are there some examples, and what is your assessment on where we are in terms of resilience and trust as an industry?
So, in terms of, I mean, if we think about trust, we also think a lot about security and controls as well, not just resiliency of the infrastructure. And Amazon, just to go back a little bit in terms of where Amazon started on some of these topics, it was really Amazon, the bookseller. If you think about the early days of the internet and think about how weird it would seem to use your credit card online. And so that was sort of the first initial hurdle that we had to overcome as a company to sort of start to kind of create that strong kind of e-commerce business, was how do we make people feel secure about using their credit cards online? And then you build from there. So security is definitely built into everything we do. And to your point about not adding security on later or sustainability on later, it's the same with security. Security is integrated into every part, and that's a huge part of, I think, of building the trust. And then the other aspect we think about are also the legal controls of all of that, but also the technical controls. And so that access, both that govern access as well as security. And so not only are our services now secure by design, but they're also sovereign by design. And when we think about that, the first thing that customers decide when they open their AWS account is where they want their data to be. So where do you want your account to reside? And so whether you want that in India or Canada, where I live, that you are choosing where you are putting your data as the first decision. And then the other thing in terms of access and control is at AWS, we can't see any of our customers' data. So by design, we have no access to our customer data. And so that, and then why do customers choose AWS or choose hyperscalers? It's really because of that the access to security, the reliability, the availability, and the resiliency of what they're able to access and build, and not just build sort of locally where they are, but also that ability to scale globally is a huge part of what our customers are looking for, and to be able to do that in a consistent and resilient way.
So if I can maybe quickly follow up on that a little bit, right? So no, I completely get that, and I think it's tremendous because this is a bedrock in terms of taking the industry forward in terms of the overall the growth that we are hoping to see over the next few years. So, but if you were to also highlight for us that what are these one or two areas where probably there is at an industry level scope for improvement when we think about either security or resilience, which and given technology is also disrupting on the other side, right? We talk about quantum, we talk about risk, and from a technology side itself. So that kind of a lens, and also you talked about customer choices. So given the fact that there are many kind of use cases, so in terms of customer choices, what has come in new, which which a CSP like yourself as a market is probably now addressing or providing, which wasn't a demand even maybe a couple of years back, if there is anything like that.
Well, I mean, I think it's the one thing that is very true is that is the innovation never stops, and the growth, the sort of new issues that you're mitigating against don't stop, but also the ability to address those challenges is constantly evolving. And I think one of the other things that we're seeing is yes, there are new threats arising because of AI or from quantum, but we're also deploying AI to address those threats as well. And so the more that you take people, I mean, this is a very sophisticated audience, but the more that you take people out of security, the more secure it is. And so the ability to sort of automate who has access, when they have access, but also being able to understand and address threats in real time through machine learning has been one of the kind of, I think, main innovations. But it never stops.
All right. So on that note, we're going to shift a bit of a gear. So I think people were familiar with data centers. People were also familiar with the cloud service providers. But does anybody know what does it mean when we say voice infrastructure? Just a show of hands, if anybody has a good understanding, what do we mean when we say voice infrastructure? Okay, all right. So I'll just take it to mean that this is an interesting conversation. So I'll bring in Ritu Mehrotra. Ritu is the founder of Shunya Labs. And I met Ritu only a few months back at another meeting and was so impressed and, to hear their story that we decided at NASCOM that we must have her as part of this conversation. So Ritu, will you tell us, what exactly does it mean when you say voice infrastructure, and why is it important, and how important it is, and what is it that you are actually doing? Yeah.
Thanks, Ashish. And first of all, great to be here. A privilege to be here today. So when I say voice infra, what it means is at the upper end of the ecosystem, when we say something, can you understand? When I say understand, and it's very nuanced, by the way, right? So when we are speaking, we don't realize, but we have these multiple different dialects, different languages. We speak with emotions, sentiments, all of it kind of comes together. So as easy as it sounds, it's extremely nuanced. So that's a first layer to it. The second layer to it is where you understand, right? So context creation.
So,
when you
feel free to give examples. We'll
Yes.
understand much better.
Yes. So after I explain, I am going to give example. So that's the second piece wherein you understand what is said, and then the third piece is where you dish it out, right? Which is called text to speech in our way. So picture this. I am somewhere in Bihar, and I speak, Bhojpuri as a language, and I am trying to understand that what my ration card balance looks like. That person maybe they don't may not know how to read or write, but are they able to say this in Bhojpuri? Mane ration card ka balance kiya ahe, right? Now, if you're looking at anybody who's doing it, and I'm sure he will concur with me as well, the way it works today is you speak in Bhojpuri. First of all, understanding Bhojpuri is not there today. We launched the first model there, translating it to English and then translating it back. Okay, the whole 3 layers of translation, the context is gone, right? So that's where, when we say that we're building voice infra, that's what it means. But it's not just understanding the voice and dishing the voice out. The important piece here is also the context. And one other piece that we work, Ashish, here is on smaller models, right, that can actually sit on people's phone, the CPU level architecture that people would want to use, rather than running kind of GPUs as well. Which is, one thing I often say is that, the kind of resources Wild West has, in terms of compute, in terms of resources, capital, data, sometimes, it's like, telling people that, okay, I want to solve traffic problem, but hey, let's get everybody a helicopter. But that does not happen for 80% of the population globally, which is where, which is very India-like. And when I say which is very India-like, if you look at large part of Europe, which is where GDPR is like so prevalent and sovereignty is, one of the key themes. Or if you look at Africa, some parts of India and some parts of Asia, where price is a big deal, and people are looking at, or the linguistic diversity from all of that standpoint. We don't speak just in English or a few top languages. So that's where I mean, when I say voice, that voice ability to be able to hear, understand, respond. That's what it means.
No, so let me just quickly follow up. So, given Indian context and given that for us dialect and language changes every so many kilometers, and but infrastructure, when we say, we always say it along with scale. So when you talk about your work, as in building these models which do this voice infra, help us understand a little more in terms of what are those use cases where this will be so valuable and beneficial at scale that they kind of solve a problem which nobody else will solve for us.
So I'll give you an example of Anganwadi worker, right? We have about 1.4 million Anganwadi centers and about 800,000 workers that are working there, right? So what this means is, if I have to launch AI at scale, and if it has to be purely done on GPUs, you can just imagine 870 million conversations, the kind of GPU consumption I'm going to have, it's going to be humongous, right? For something like that. And that's where, you pitch in, wherein you say that, okay, number one, can you make this at, I don't know, 1/20th of the cost? Can it actually understand the language of the person that a local Anganwadi worker is speaking in Marathi, and being it not translated to English and then translated back in Marathi, but Marathi being spoken, fetching into the system and giving the response back, so that you don't lose the context in translation. And when you have 3 different villages actually looking at this data, they are triangulating if there is a disease that could, early detection of a disease or something. So this is just one example that I gave you in the healthcare context, if you will.
All right, all right. So we'll come back and we'll talk about the future also, Ritu, with you. So from a founder, we'll move to a professor. All right. So we have a professor here, Mr. Ravi Kiran, and so you are associate professor at the International Institute of Information Technology at Hyderabad, and at Bharat Gen, you are the core team member and principal investigator for vision projects. And as we know, Bharat Gen is one of the startups, the 12 startups that has made that cut to be developing the language models to solve for India. So again, Professor Kiran, delighted to have you on this panel. And so I think the first question, and I'm asking on behalf of maybe a larger audience, is that what is it that one thing or maybe two that an Indian model can solve better or can solve, which we can't get from whatever is available elsewhere. So I know there is a capability question that even if it is available elsewhere, we should do it. We should, but that's not my question here. My question is, what is it that we are trying to solve, which probably cannot be solved by models elsewhere, and it's more in the Bharatjan context, because we already heard Ritu. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm really enjoying listening to all the conversation here, all the discussion here, because well, we operate mostly at the software level, and we sleep better at night knowing that the foundation is secure. We kind of take it for granted, but when foundations fall apart, then we appreciate them. So for one, I'm really happy to be in a learning environment. I have picked up a lot of useful things. Right. So Bharat Gen's primary motive is to build sovereign models and build applications based on that in India for India. And as part of this, it's important to understand that, to answer your question, technically there is nothing that others cannot do in terms of what we are doing, right? So given the same kind of conditions, right, it's almost like a lab experiment, right? Like, if you are given X, Y, and Z, will the outcome of that process be the same? So I think from a technology point of view, I don't think there is something fundamentally unique. Having said that, I think there are certain aspects that I believe that we are uniquely positioned to solve. And I'll give you an example of that. For example, take public grievances. Ordinarily, citizens, when they have grievances, they take them to the law, right? Like the law enforcement or the government. And it's unlikely that they would expect their problems to be solved by, typing into ChatGPT, right? Well, I mean, they might get some ideas about how to go about it, but it's unlikely that they will be solved. Or Gemini, for that matter.
On this panel, Gemini.
On this panel, Gemini. Fair enough. So the government actually has a Directorate of Public Grievances, which is established for this purpose. And what you have over there is a portal where citizens can upload their grievances in different formats. And when I mean different formats, it is truly different formats. People can record their grievance, people can upload documents related to their grievance. Now, think about handling the diversity and the different modalities. You're talking about speech, you're talking about text, right? Documents and so on. Now, dealing with all of this as a manual process is going to be totally not scalable. And that is where I think we can step in. And in fact, we have stepped in. Right? So this is, I think, a good example of something that
This is a real use case you're talking about. This is, I think it takes away the follow-on question, because I was going to ask you that whom are you building for? So I think, and you're so right that while the underlying technology doesn't change, it is the context which really makes it very different. And given AI is all about data and the algo working together, so we'll come back to it because it's very interesting. A lot of people will want to know how soon, how fast, how good will some of this come out. Okay, all right. So with that, we have kind of one round. The intent of this round was to get us up to speed to where we are mostly in the world. What is really happening? What are we doing? Now in this next round, which is our last round maybe, we are going to focus on the future. We are going to look forward, because this is a summit on AI impact. And I think we have established that what is happening is highly impactful. But what is that impact going to further translate into next 12 odd months or further is something that we'll all be very interested in understanding. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to switch gears a little bit in terms of the format. I'm going to pull in my colleague Sudipto Banerjee, who is sitting in the audience with his nice pink tie. So Sudipto has been working with us on a lot on the data center work, and he has a question for Sharad. So I'll not run with my question. I'll ask Sudipto to go ahead and ask what he wants to know.
Yeah, hi, Sharad. So we heard in the first round that the reality check of India's 1 gigawatt and which is less than the total data center capacity of Chicago. And yeah, and we also get to hear these projections of 10 gigawatt by 2030. So I mean, as Ashish said that we are expecting this round to be a future forward looking. How realistic is this estimate? And also, if we dig deeper into this, if we bifurcate the demand right now, how much is the domestic demand? How much is actually driven by the hyperscalers? Because we get to hear when we interact that we are dependent on the demand that is created by the hyperscalers. So our demand market is actually being driven by mostly by the hyperscalers. And please correct me if I'm wrong. So if you can give also a mix of how that demand would actually look like. And one last, I mean, I'm getting an opportunity, so I'll ask one more question. That if one wish were to be granted in terms of any policy change or any particular change in the Indian ecosystem, what would that be? And hypothetically, imagine that wish will get granted. So please be bold. If one lever you had to pick up.
So for data centers, the demand may be coming from the hyperscalers, but hyperscalers are not serving the world. Hyperscalers in India are serving India. So their India deployment is for India. Whether the India deployment is for the world or not, that is, we will watch, right? I'm hoping that they will serve world also from India, and then we will get benefited by that. So it is India demand. So let's get this out that we are dependent on any kind of a foreign demand. If the foreign demand comes, then my 10 gigawatt could turn into 20, right? So let's not get there, right? Let's focus on this. Second, just the data pattern. Since COVID, India's data center infrastructure grew at a 28% CAGR from 0.4 gigawatt to 1.3 gigawatt by end of 2024. I have these exact numbers, that's why I'm counting end of 2024, not guessing any 2025 number yet. Even if I keep the same growth rate and just put in a small acceleration to the fact that the cloud adoption in the country is still in high single digit or maybe very low double digit, no more than 10 or 11%. In comparison to the developed world where the cloud penetration is closer to 40%. Let's assume that only 40% of the IT can be cloudified, remaining could still have to be non-cloud. Then also there is a 4 times of the just the cloud demand to happen. And if I count that same 28% CAGR, and take it in 7% acceleration on that, then 1.3 gigawatt becomes 6 gigawatt by the end of 2030. Did not count anything to do with artificial intelligence, did not count anything to do with what the data protection acts could come into the picture. And if you add to that, then someone if says it's a 10 gigawatt, then it's entirely possible. So the demand wise, there is a solid foundation to that number. That's where we could say that it will be there. And in recent time, what we have seen in there is a good amount of inferencing related workloads started to come to India, and therefore that 10 gigawatt is possible. That was the first question about the demand, whether 10 is real or not. The second one was
Also, I think Likhnosa Tarisha was also asking that, okay, this is the domestic demand, but how do you also see the demand coming from overseas? The Indian data centers actually catering to the global.
that's where I am fully relying on the latest union budget's clarification on the tax avoidance that has come up. Earlier, the what is called POEM, uh, place of effective management, was a big concern with the global hyperscalers or the global players. Now that being removed with the 20-year tax holiday, I'm assuming that some of that will come to India, and that should be able to bring to India. There are all the ingredients in place in India to be able to attract at least the regional demand. Power is available immediately, talent is available immediately, ecosystem is ready to build as much data center as possible. It's not just us, but then at least three big conglomerates have also talked about gigawatt capacity in the country, right? And then with our experience, obviously we will be the bigger one with them, bigger. but
So,
so that way there are all the tailwinds in place to host at least the regional data. The cable landing stations are getting ready in the eastern coast, which will can easily serve at least the Southeast Asian demand. So yes, the foreign demand also should be able to be hosted in India. One thing that you wanted my wish, right?
yes, yes. Don't forget the wish. Yes.
The wish is very simple: true single window clearance. If today I have to go, and if any new data center project starts in the country, it's minimum 4 years from the operation. 1 year takes to to get your head around the right land with the power. Another 1 year takes to get the all the approvals in place, and then you take 2 years to deploy and commission. At least, yeah.
Okay.
She
So,
said, so at least this 2 years can be made zero with the single window clearances and true single window clearance.
okay. So the government is listening, and your wish is granted. But Vartika and Swapnil, this is an area that we are working for, so it'll be good to double click on that. Okay. All right. So I know that power and connectivity is also the base layer for you, and in that sense, from an India point of view, I think the story is let's build it, and there is so much demand that all effort will be counted. So, and I'll come back to Rishali again, and then to Nicole. When you look at sustainability as something that we discussed earlier, and often in tech industry what happens is what is science fiction today becomes science tomorrow. So in the sustainability kind of a space, what are some of the things that you are looking forward to in terms of in terms of breakthroughs, whether they are processes or whether they are technologies, or what are the new developments which you hope to see in market or even experiment? And I'm going to also be a little more take a India lens, because you announce this big investment which is coming up in Vizag. So probably that will see some of those newer things in terms of sustainability play out. So help us understand in terms of future. And it's not just about Google. I think you can take a broader industry lens and give us a peek into what to expect.
Yeah, I like the analogy of like what we see in movies and becomes real, which is good and bad both, right? Can be a little bit scary too. So let me start with, there are, I look at the physical infrastructure side first from a sustainability perspective. I think from that, and if you go to, especially for India, so India's got tremendous solar capacity. We know that right now it almost produces more than it can use during during the daytime, and so I think the big thing for India from a sustainability point of view will be sort of storage. So either it is best sort of battery storage or long duration hydro. How do you figure out a storage model that takes benefit of all the solar and wind? I don't think generation is a problem right now as much as then making sure that it is 24 hours, and then you bring that into a grid and make sure the grid is reliable. I think that to me is a big piece. And to me, sustainability is right now, if you think from an energy perspective, is unlocking clean energy at scale, and for everybody, and then making it very affordable. And to do those two things, you have to have things such as, I think battery is a very important one, long duration storage is important, and grid infrastructure. So the way, one of the things I loved, I was here last year in Bikaner, and I saw not just the miles and miles of solar panels, but the new sort of the new stations that they are being built, and the new grid infrastructure and the high frequency grid, which then becomes an interconnected grid across India, which is fascinating. So I think that, as going to your point, the faster you can scale that, I think is a big unlock. So that's a physical infrastructure side. From a data construction point of view, I think there's a lot under green steel and green cement that we can do in India. A lot of the big players are in it, and there are many different ways. It could be from the innovation side of materials, it could be from a curation side. And the reason these are specific, because most of like from a construction perspective, cement is very local. You could have amazing technology breakthrough somewhere else, but you're not going to get the cement to local place. And same with steel. We've got great steel plants, in India. So how do you make that construction as green as possible? Is the next big one. And then the third is the application layer. What I like about what you were saying is, you don't want to run large language models. You don't want to do this training, but there's inference. And then how can you be hyper local with your inference and running those smaller models? And I think we haven't tapped into that as much. And so the more efficiency we can bring into that and the more innovation we can bring into that, and especially when you're looking at a billion consumers, as much as I love infrastructure and I'm responsible for it, I would love to have more easy applications and fine-tuned deployment that, sort of where the demand is, you can have real-time demand response, you can figure out which models to use when and how to right size it.
And AI can come to rescue in that side also.
Yes, I'm hoping. If you're hoping, we're on the demand response side and load balancing. We are trying. There is, and even on the grid infrastructure and optimization, we are. But it's early stages. So
All right, good luck to that. Vatika, you had a question for Ritu as a follow-on, and Vatika, she's part of the team. She's been working on a lot of these works with startups along with Supnil. So I'm going to request her to pose a question for you.
Thank you, Ashish. Ritu, first of all, thank you for educating all of us on voice infrastructure. It was really interesting. I just wanted to know, looking ahead, maybe say the next 2 years, what, according to you, would be the most tangible change, from actually this India built, frugal, accessible AI movement that we are all witnessing today? From that perspective, if you could just pick one sector where you feel we'll see the impact fastest, be it education, banking, healthcare, I don't know, you pick it. And if you can tell us what is it that the users will see as a difference, and if I can just extend the question a little more, if from the same sector you could also tell us what is it today that is the most hard part where, which is kind of holding you from seeing the impact that you would want to see? And what do you think will change, in the next 2 years to make it accessible? It could be, from Shunya Labs perspective, it could be from, other startups perspective, but please feel free to answer. Thank you.
Start with the industry lens. I'll start with the industry lens, and then maybe I'll move towards, where do I see? So the first thing I think as the industry we have to work on is trust. And that's the most important thing, right? So when I'm talking to any of the answering engines, Gemini or any other player, I think the first thing that we're thinking that, okay, where is the data going? What is it storing? So on. That's number one. Number two is its ability to contextualize me. And I'll give you an example. As I said a couple of minutes back as well, that let's say I'm in a rural town, I'm a woman who has to deliver a baby, or I'm going to a local health, facility. Its ability to understand my language, my problem, related to my ecosystem, is available on my device, and is kind of understanding that. So that's my level of, that in the next couple of years, if we or quarters, if we can get there, I think that is going to be great. So I think the distance that we have to cover is trust. Even in the companies today, when we deploy our voice solutions, right, the first thing that we hear is that the first time when you go in and your AI system doesn't understand what people are saying, the trust level goes down by 22%, and it happens one more time, it goes dramatically, and then people kind of lose interest. And that's why, we are seeing that the abandonment of a large AI projects is kind of, it's interesting to see what the numbers look like today, right? So that's point number one. Point number two is, if we have to make it to scale, it has to be efficient. I'm not saying it has to be cheap, right? There's a difference between making it cheap and making it frugal, the word that you use, right? It has to be, efficient. Um, I'll give an example, right? One of the large companies has spent 680,000 hours to train a model that will dish out results, right? Whereas a company in India, and I know of many companies in India, and one of them, as I said, is sitting next to me, and Shunya, by the way, does the same thing. Can you do this in, let's say, 40 GPU hours, right? Or 1,000 voice samples. So efficiencies will have to kick in, I think, in different. And sometimes you also say, right, that when you don't have enough resources, then it becomes the mother of all invention. So I think that's where it'll go, in my mind. So that's the end state. But the way to do it is going to be building efficient systems. That is going to be able to give you better tomorrow.
Do you think it's going to be the healthcare sector which
Well, one of the biggest beneficiaries, having said that, obviously finance, right? It's another one. Banking. How do you take banking to every remote part of the country? And I will not say illiterate. I will say low literate, right? We have the largest number of smartphones in the world, right? And there are people who understand, who can speak, but they can't read English. Can we actually build something for these people to be able to be a part of the ecosystem?
All right, Ritu, thanks. Nicole, I was holding a tough conversation for you for a gap because my conversation is going to shift back onto the larger discussion that is now so common as against maybe even 3 years back is on sovereignty. Now a lot of the conversation is around delivering that as a feature of the infrastructure itself. So being a global corporation and looking at that entire space, I mean, if you help us understand going forward, where do you think that entire kind of a piece is headed in terms of in a very simple terms, where do you see, for example, this is going to be non-negotiable in terms of certain areas maybe, and in certain other areas where it might be a combination of factors where in some areas people will choose to do that, and what are those areas where one could still say that the end-to-end experience can be delivered without necessarily compromising in terms of the global nature of the entire delivery, while ensuring that the experiences in terms of control or access meets the sovereignty requirement, but doesn't necessarily need to compromise in terms of the way the physical architecting has to be done. So can you give us some sense of the future?
So first, I just want to say that this is not just this conversation is not just happening in oh, sorry, my jet lag brain is having trouble in India, but it's certainly happening all over the world in many countries, and it's very understandable as to why. I live in Canada, and we this is a very very kind of active discussion where I live as well. I did I think it's worth thinking about what it is that cloud brings and why people are still going to end up really having to make difficult decisions just because of the opportunities of working with the cloud. Cloud is not a data center. It's a lot more than a data center. And cloud is, so first I just want to say we live in an extremely globally interconnected world. So the idea of kind of unweaving the interconnectedness is very difficult and probably not that desirable. But when we think about what cloud has done for artificial intelligence, cloud has really enabled this technology to be so accessible to people who are not PhDs in AI and machine learning. And so cloud has really been an enabler of the accessibility of this technology. And like I said, cloud is not just a data center. We can break it down into sort of three basic levels of the technology stack. And it's important to think about the different layers because how we mitigate some of the risks that we might see is going to change in how we think about the different layers of the stack. So for example, at the foundational layer of the stack or the training level of the stack, that is really only, I mean, though that is probably a little bit easier to build technically would be if you just want to have a training data center. But there's very few people who can use it. You have to be really clever, like some of the people on this panel. But not all organizations have really sophisticated developers of technology. And so that while that layer is maybe easy to build, it's not the most accessible layer to use. And so the middle layer of the stack is the stack where cloud providers have created all kinds of different tools and basically the Lego blocks to build AI applications. And so, and they also make lots of models available. You can bring your own model. It gives you all of the security protections, all the responsible AI innovations. And so this is the layer for your economy that is really important. So if you're thinking about how organizations and how companies are going to sort of be able to use AI and deploy AI without having a PhD, AI, like somebody who's really super expert at it, but someone who's got really strong IT skills, that middle layer is super important for your economy. And that's the innovation, the real innovation of AI that people are able to access in the cloud that is going to be the game changer for our economies. And so that's the part that's hard to replicate in just building a data center. And so that's why you're going to see different types of strategies or mitigations when you're thinking about what is important for me to have control over, what is important for me to be able to govern, both from a legal aspect or a technical control aspect. And it can be different things. It could be maybe you want to use open source models instead of first party models because those give you more portability. And there's a bunch of different ways that organizations are going to think about that, but there are going to be significant trade-offs that we have to make in order to access the best innovation or the most resilient infrastructure or the most secure capacity in order to kind of also manage those other concerns. But it is complicated. But I do think that there's still a ton of value that CSPs offer in an environment where organizations are very concerned about having that control that they want to have.
Yeah. I think that beep is for us maybe, but I'm not going to end without getting Professor Kiran for a last word on this, and then we'll conclude. So uh, I just want to come straight to the future again, and we know about the India AI mission, the fact that what the Indian startups are trying to do. So help us understand what will success really look like in next 4 or 5 years, and try to explain it to us. I know the beep is going on, but we'll probably take 2 3 minutes for you to help make us understand that. And also, if we don't reach where we wish to, I'm sure we will. But what is that one factor that we would probably need to make sure that that doesn't give us that place for any losses? So help us understand.
Right. So I think that's really a very nice question. This is a question that we ask ourselves all the time. I think all organizations do ask what would success look like. You visualize it, you plan for it. So I think success, and when I say success, not just for solely Bharat but for all the initiatives which are part of this cohort, would be to have for AI what UPI did for the country. So we want to have the UPI movement for uh, India. So that would be what I call the first level of success. And then to have the Nokia level of success, where there is a very small group of people sitting somewhere in a very small country, but they are making a product which everybody seems to use, right? And at some point that was certainly the case, right? Everybody seemed to have a Nokia phone with them, right? And they were uh, they had a certain resilience to them, right? Everybody I think can attest to the resilience of those
That's
phones.
true. That's true. I remember.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Like, people claim to throw them from 10 stories and then pick them up and like, yeah, works. Yeah, too bad. Right. So that would be, I think, the second level of success. So these are like what I call broad successes. I think the third would be uh, contextual and hyperfocal level of success. And what I mean by that is success which reaches the last mile, right? So you can put things in context, and when that last mile is reached, then I think we have gotten there. Now, for the failure, I think data is more siloed than we would like it to be. And if at all we fall short in reaching any of these levels, I think it is going to be the silos, be it at governance level or any other level, that is going to be a showstopper. And the second is talent, right? Because this is not a labor problem. You cannot throw people at it, right? So as an academic, one of the core duties and responsibilities for me is skilling, right? I see teaching as a very important part of what I do. And so this cannot be done like any other teaching, right? Like you are looking for a very small set of people who need to be able to do this, right? So this, I think, are some things to think about. Yeah.
All right, great. So we are so completely out of time. I'm Ashish Agarwal, Head of Public Policy at NASSCOM. As NASSCOM, it has been a pleasure to be hosting this event. And thank you so much for bringing so much insight and value to this. I think it's a combination of you and each of you highlighting. And so thank you, Ravi. Thank you, Ritu. Thank you, Rushali. Thank you, Nicole. And thank you, Sharad, for this very insightful panel. And all the very best to you from all of us at NASSCOM. And thank you, audience, for your patience. And I'm sure there'll be time for questions after we are done with this. Thank you.